you.
And I want to have a conversation with you on leadership. You have experience in leadership, yes?
Of course. I mean, I live day in, out being a leader. So yeah, absolutely.
Is it something you ever thought you would be when you were 14, 15, being a leader?
I would say so. Maybe not at 14, 15, but even maybe below that. There's this episode when I was a child in primary school where I don't know where I found the inspiration. It's always really awkward. But I would knock off from school and then get home and then mobilize kids from my neighborhood because my parents had bought me a blackboard, and eventually I would want to teach my fellow children like what I learned in school. And everyone at home found that very interesting because everyone was like, but maybe she wants to be a posici or a teacher or something. And then I was like, but I don't know. I'm not very sure about what my career path looks like. But obviously, I learned a lot about already influencing people as a child, pretty much from 8 years old to somewhere around 15. I've lived through it.
Okay. So what would you say are some of the qualities of being a good leader?
Okay, so I think it varies between different situations, honestly. And leadership has different styles. So especially if you're running a business, you have to maneuver different leadership styles from being an autocrat to a democrat. And sometimes you combine the leadership styles, but every situation requires its own traits of a leader. But I think a few that I can highlight are the importance of being someone who has a positive attitude, because it brings out a lot of energy amongst the people that you're going to lead or influence to get into some developments that you would obviously want them to. And the importance of communicating. You appear in the public, you talk to people, you negotiate for things. All of that requires you to be a great communicator. And you need to be a really good manager as well. So I know there's always a difference that comes. People want to know what's a good leader, what's a good manager. But obviously a good leader is a good manager. So you need to know how to plan, you need to know how to organize yourself, direct people, direct how resources are going to be placed in different structures. And at the same time, you're also looking at how by the end of the day you mobilize people and then lure them into a certain culture that you want them to be a part of. So there's always those important traits that you need to have as a leader.
Okay. And what are some of the challenges of leading people that you have actually feel annoyed by?
You say annoyed? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think leadership is always challenging, honestly, and you will always grasp challenges even from day one of you understanding the fact that I think I've taken up leadership or a leadership role, because first of all, there's people management involved, and people are different. People are very difficult to deal with if you're not very careful. And I think for me, that's maybe one of the biggest challenges that I've encountered in terms of how do I really build meaningful relationships with people that I lead, and also at the same time make sure that I'm able to influence them to also have a culture that will influence other people. So there's a word people always like to use, you're my role model. Sometimes we use that word in a petty manner. You don't understand how, if someone is your role model, it's because there's something in their leadership journey that has influenced you. But how are you replicating that in your own personal prospects to make sure that the people that inspire you are leaving a mark that you're also using to leave a mark on other people? But by the end of the day, dealing with people is not the easiest thing. And sometimes, maybe specific to being a woman, it's also the stereotype that comes with it. Sometimes people cannot be led by a woman. It's really hectic. And I think in terms of our culture, it's still something people are working on grasping.
Have you personally experienced some sort of discriminatory acts against you because of your gender?
Yeah, I think I would say so. Maybe sometimes it's things that I disregard, but I think if it's something that I would take to heart, obviously it's several encounters. I think one of the episodes that I always laugh at is, for instance, if you and me went to have lunch, for example, and in that type of environment, obviously if the waiter comes to bring the bill and they just assume that you're the person taking the leading role. Yeah, but half of the time it's like, okay, maybe I called this meeting, so why would someone else assume that it's not me, it's the male counterpart that I'm with that's responsible. So I think I've had a lot of encounters in that sort of sphere. It sounds small, but I think it's still a societal stereotype that exists, that people still assume that the male is more into a leadership sphere than the woman. So yeah, I think that's just one of the examples that there could be more, obviously.
But you just hopefully let them go.
It's okay. But yeah, sometimes it's also good to educate each other. So yeah, sometimes I would maybe make a comment that just highlights how it's important not to assume certain things in certain situations.
Being a leader must be kind of stressful. How do you deal with mental well-being?
Okay. So I think in my case, I treasure my mental health, and also I have self-care days that I really put to good use. It's not very easy, especially if you have to manage work, and then there's you as an individual, and then you also have a family. I think there's always that sort of rotation of multitasking involved, but I always make time for myself, just so I can have a better time to reflect. I think a better leader always has to take time to reflect. Not even reflecting for others, but reflecting on themselves and how they're going to improve how their outlook looks like when they now show up to the people. I always believe an individual who has a better understanding of themselves, a strong self-esteem, can be able to show up and also encourage other people better. Unlike if you're dealing with a lot of issues you fully don't understand about yourself, and then you want to portray to other people that you're a very good leader. So it's important to always take time to take care of yourself as a leader before you take care of other people. So for me, your mental health and well-being is very crucial, but at the same time, it's more or less understanding how to leverage on what sort of spaces and environment should be able to help you build better self-care, but also some energy that reciprocates both for you and even the people that you're going to work with or be around more in. And that includes family. Sometimes family can also stress you. It's very possible. So there always has to be a certain balance that you have in at what point do you maneuver work, do you maneuver your household, your family, and then your friends, and what time for yourself as an individual, because you need that time. It's very, very important.
How do you find the inspiration to keep creating programs, projects? What's the process for you?
Process. Okay, I think it's sometimes lesser of the process. As a social innovator, I am always looking at the problems I personally face And then I also look at how many people experience such type of problems in creating or curating programs that would eventually support not just me, but even other people out there. Because for me, it's from a knowledge sharing context or a learning context, where for me, I'm interested in learning what, say, young people that come and leverage on the different programs that we run are benefiting and how it's improving their lives. But it also means, as a social innovator, I'm learning how that program, if it's really important to the community, how do I continue to improve that until it becomes really a high impact intervention that is really creating meaningful impact for not just 10 people, but 100 more. So it's the problem solving context that I have been living with, I think, from even the time that I established Mzuzu E-Hub until today. Because I think you walk in the streets of Malawi every single time, you are dealing with, seeing, meeting a problem every single time. Now, if there's nobody looking at how do we solve these problems, because it's our responsibility by the end of the day, there's no one who's going to come from somewhere and save us. Someone has to take up a role and think through it and come up with solutions that eventually support all of us, including ourselves. So we're in it, we're in there. Those are like our problems to hold, and it's not just other people's. And the solutions that come out, there are even solutions that will help all of us.
So what would be your advice to someone out there who wants to be that productive in their communities?
So my biggest advice would be, if you're within a community that you have an eye for identifying problems, create communities as well within that same community that is creating solutions for those problems. It sometimes does not matter whether you start really small, whether the solution maybe utilizes local solutions or resources, unlike thinking that each and everything you start needs vast resources. Sometimes money follows you later. You just need to figure out, as a community, this is what we're going to work on. And at some point, you never know who's going to come in and support you. And that solution becomes something that's a larger, impactful solution for the entire country. So we hold the power, and in community, there's even more power. So it's coming from an individual holding all the power, then it increases to the community holding the power. And then in that power, we can achieve so much with it than always assuming that there is one soul from another area that's coming here to solve our problems. But at the same time, lead with innovation in mind. The world is moving at a very fast pace, so it means we can be left behind in our type of thinking. If we're even building the solutions, it's important to always explore what modern trends are happening at this time. Sometimes not all of us maybe might not be exposed to what sort of modern trends are there, but it's also important to even learn what sort of platforms we need to be apart from. I think that's why hubs like us are here, because we can be able to connect people to what skills they need to be developing that will help them become competitive on the job market. If we're also looking at improving businesses, what sort of expertise do people need to make sure that they're incorporating in their businesses that's improving themselves? So sometimes hunt for it. Don't just be in a comfort zone and be like, I know everything, because there's so much we don't know out there. Even I personally, I keep learning every single day, because that helps me to continue improving whatever leadership approaches I can use as an individual, but also how I can develop everything that surrounds my life.
Okay. It's amazing. Maybe just a couple of questions on teams now, because if there's someone out there who wants to be a young leader or lead their community out of some situation, I think they will need help, right? Might not be from big stakeholders, organizations, but their fellow youth. How can the youth come together and actually form maybe just say for example a youth club? What type of mentality should they have? Or like a business?
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I have not personally been in a space where I was to join hands with fellow young people and establish a youth network or a youth organization, but I have volunteered in an existing youth network that a certain group of young people had already established. And for me, one of the key things that I learned through that experience was sometimes you don't have to start something. You can join something that already exists and be part of a team that's contributing towards change. And in the course of that, you've learned how that sort of network is being implemented, and you can narrow it down and maybe go and start something in your community. But at the same time, I think as a leader, maybe you're the quickest person to identify a problem, and then you're the quickest person to also figure out how a solution looks like. So at this point, if you're going to be the one playing the bigger role of establishing something, it means you need to carry a strong voice to the community and lure people to join that community. And that's a lot of influence. That means people will have questions, but in those questions, it means you must be able to justify why there is need for that network, there is need for that association, and how it's going to contribute to them building something that actually becomes something beneficial for the community. And you never know, maybe this year it supports 10 because those are like the co-founders, but then it grows into a network of 1,000 young people in there. So there's always one in the bigger picture or two at times, but it's not very easy. And I think in developing a group type of intervention, there's a lot of partnership aspects that all of you always have to incorporate. The importance of governance. How are you registering the network, if it's a youth network that is? How are you building the leadership structure? There has to be either a chairperson, a treasurer, whoever. How are you identifying those things? Because the sooner they're also done well, the lesser the problems where people come in and they're complaining how anango sankana. Yeah, so I think not everyone is interested in leadership. Some are followers and they're just interested in being a part of a grouping. By the end of the day, without really attaching themselves to the fact that the person in the chair. Yeah, so there's always that experience.
All right, so anyway, thank you for appearing on this podcast. I'm sure you're also going to give us a chance when we invite you next time.
Of course, no problem. And thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Maybe if you have one more thing to say.
I think I've said enough. I've said enough, guys. Yeah, but I think it's important to build the human capital context for individuals, especially for Malawi. There's a lot of mindset shift that needs to happen. We need more leaders, especially knowing young people are the highest population that we have, and we need to make sure that there's a lot of productivity involved as well in this population. And one thing that we need to do a lot of transferring in terms of skill is the leadership aspect. So I hope that young people are taking up spaces and are taking up opportunities to become leaders Not for tomorrow, but for today, because that's what's important.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.